Good afternoon to all of you in the room and those online. My name is Jose Rivas. For those of you that don't know me, I am a partner here in Berenberg, Brussels. And I have the pleasure to introduce to you our keynote speaker. In fact, the organizers could have disposed of me because Paul Csiszár does not need to be introduced. But I would like to do three things. I want to tell you a little bit about the origin and background of Paul. I want to highlight what I think it is a rather unique feature of him, and particularly for those that for good or for bad have had to deal with him, and I will come back to this in a minute. And finally, I will conclude with the reason why he's here with us today. The origin, Paul is a graduate from the LT School of Law in Budapest. He undertook further studies in comparative international law and earned a second Juris Doctorate at Loyola School in Chicago in the United States. The feature that I mentioned that is rather unique is that he was admitted as a practicing lawyer in the US, in California, back in 1986. So he has a hell of an experience as a practitioner. And this is what I meant with that is something that transpires when dealing with him for good or for bad, as I said. In 1997, he became a practitioner here in Europe with Squire Sanders until 2003 when he joined the public service. And this is the reason why he is here. Mr. Csiszár is the director of Directorate A, Markets and Cases in Basic Industries, Manufacturing and Agriculture of DG Competition of the European Commission. So, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Jose, thank you very much for your very kind introduction. It's my merits are way overstated. Probably you learned a lot today. I certainly learned one basic rule: never ever accept a keynote speech after a panel where the same subject discussed who wrote the books. Out of question. As I was listening to this panel, I had to rewrite my keynote speech because some of the basic things were already stated in the panel. And I tried to make some notes where I very much agree with the panelists. So I will repeat that. And fortunately or unfortunately, I found one or two elements where I would respectfully disagree with the panelists, or at least would have a different view. First, a disclaimer. I saw some journalists, God forbid, please. So I'm speaking in my personal capacity, nothing to be attributed to my commissioner or to DG Comp or the commission. And please, no attribution, no quotations, etc., etc. Otherwise, it's just going to be a boring speech, recycling basic statements. I also will not answer questions on hypothetical fact patterns or going beyond on the Aspen case other than what we wrote down, because this is still something we did one single case in excessive pricing. Maybe there are more, maybe not going to be any in the pipeline. The dynamics, which I said in the past in public, this is a priority setting issue for the Commission. I mean, the outside world doesn't think in terms. They try to interpret what we do, what the courts meant to say to us. But for us, in my directorate, there are 15 people, 18 people max who deals with antitrust pharma. Right, you mentioned a very complex case, a new wave of cases, Teva-Copaxone case, which is very different. We move away from the pay for delays, which we successfully winning in courts pretty much. So we have to decide, do we do case A or do we do case B? Because we cannot do both of them. So we have limited resources. And later I will touch upon a very interesting comments on the Article 9 solution and the slight disagreement even between the panelists on the value and the use of Article 9. I keep it to the end. So in the priority setting, I have a simple mind, partially because in my very first job as a private lawyer, the senior partner told me in 1986 in California, welcome to the firm. You guys are the new associates. Soon you're going to make 6 figures. That was in 86. But never forget, we are working for people who make 7 or 8 figures. In other words, pretty much what business people want to do is to make money. That's pretty much there in their DNA, especially the ones who are successful. And the legal bar in private sector, this pretty much helps them to pave the way to that. It's a very simple dynamic. So what happens in the pharma sector, which is, for me, is a little bit unique. Why is it unique? First, I start with the political statement, which I think is very good. We coined it for our commissioner 8 years ago. She's been using it, and I think it's a good coining. The goal, the political mandate is access to innovative and affordable medicines for European citizens. Innovative and affordable. You already see where the issue I'm getting it. It's about incentives to innovations, et cetera, et cetera. Not that simple. Why is pharma so unique? It was said before, because the product is very, very inelastic, right? And that gets into the economic value discussions because simply, and perhaps we can put up one of the 2 slides, which I've been using it a lot in the last couple of years. Yeah, okay, which one? This actually, I wanted to go. Okay, so this is my first slide. It just simply says something unnatural is happening, right? When it comes to excessive pricing, you see the drug lifetime optimization. It's very self-explanatory. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. A lot of things got dropped dead. It's a speculative thing. It's a very interesting thing. Who are taking these risks and who are those guys who are making money in the middle? They're not always the same. Very interesting. The dynamics and risk-taking are different. And then you would understand that sooner or later, when generic competition appears, price is going to kind of go down. But we observe many times very sharp high prices. Now, there's an American guy whom I'm absolutely grateful, because in the last 8 years now contributed to my job security and having more resources in my directorate. This guy's name is Martin Shkreli. Anybody knows him? Who doesn't know? Who doesn't know Martin Shkreli? Oh, right. An American entrepreneur and I love to talk about him because he never came to Europe. His name and his company was never associated with Europeans, so nobody can say I picked the wrong guy. He bought a drug, Doraprim, his company, I think in 10 years ago, which was a life-saving drug. The patent expired in 1963. Originally, the drug was for tropical diseases, but then later it was discovered that it's an essential element to deal with HIV patients. So it's a life-saving drug. The drug was, until he bought it, sold $6 to $12 before. He raised the price to $750 in 2014. 750. This is from CNBC and whatever. It was all over the place interviewing him. He was saying, well, you want to live, you have to buy this drug. This is market. This is capitalism. He didn't use exactly these words, but he had this. There were congressional hearings. Beautiful. I mean, if you want to read them, it's publicly available. He was getting coached by lawyers and public relations agencies. He says, just say to Congress that you wanted to reinvest the money in innovation. Just say it in innovation. Yeah. These type of things, it's littered. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. This guy doesn't know anything about pharmaceuticals. He was a broker on Wall Street, made a few million or a few dozen millions. Thank you very much. So, total public outcry, right? Now, a couple of years later, I'm at NY, 4 years later, 3-4 years later, I'm at NYU. The audience was slightly more hostile than you are. Economists, private practitioners, big pharma representatives, they were hammering me. The night before, I knew it's not going to be an easy one, because why, European Commission, you fiddle with excessive pricing when orthodox antitrust says there's no such thing as excessive pricing or excessive price. In economics, there is no such thing as fair price or unfair price. You know, you have to deal with, rightfully so, actually, 99% of the cases, market power. How did you get the market power, and so forth? What about foreclosure, exclusionary practices, and so forth? So I was thinking, how can I rebut and still defend my position that I always use this guy to kick off the discussions? And then I Googled, 4 years after this hit the fan, what's the price of Daraprim? And it came back $480. Still, 4 years later, bingo. I put it in my pocket. The guys started to give me the big speech about laissez-faire, Adam Smith, market economy should correct itself. You wait, whatever. And I said, look, the invisible hand has got stuck in the pocket. So, how do you know that? It says, can somebody Google what's the price of Daraprim? The audience, and somebody yelled, 480 something or whatever. So what do we have? We have a market failure and a regulatory failure. The market failure is obvious because it's off patent for decades. Why do you have a regulatory failure? Because the very same drug throughout these years have been selling in 80 or 90 countries around the world. Remember, originally it's for tropical diseases, between 30 cents and 80 cents. And it continued to be sold during all this period. And in the US, they couldn't get somehow that drug for one reason or other. Probably there are good reasons on quality and so forth. So we face a regulatory failure as well as a market failure, and there is no correcting mechanism in place, which we observe. So what do we do? Obviously, doing nothing is not optimal. Why? The society, governments have finite resources, whether it's a national health system or private insurance, finite resources. If you pay unnecessarily $750 for a drug, if you manage to pay, right? Then you take money away from a hospital bed, from something else, and somebody gets short-handed. It's the philosophical fairness of Adam's question, who, where, what. But we all know that this guy who never invented anything, never intended to invest in early pipeline drugs, he shouldn't collect $750 on that pill, which is sold in 100 countries for about $1. So what do we do? In Europe, it's a little bit easier because we have Article 102. It says clearly unfair and so forth. So we don't have a problem. We have a problem exactly how to calibrate what is excessive. And I have very little to add what's being told. we all have to mull over these few judgments and the commission decisions. Taking in each case, you have certain factors which helps you to make the case. The legislator has not tasked the regulator to define what's excessive. Obviously, high price, unfair price, excessive price is a continuum. One can argue from the light gray to the dark gray and to the black. We don't have to decide. We don't have to define where that line is. We have to address a case. If we authorities decide to pick a case and we think we can manage to convince our judges, if the case is appealed, that this is unfair, this is excessive, and it fits somehow in that. By the way, there was a question about different economic approaches. I mean, one practical advice. If you are on the defense and you're foreseeing, you want to try several methods and figure out what's more suitable for you. If you are on the prosecutor side, you try to think it over, which method the defense will come back. And you probably want to bring the case which fits into several methods, because that gives you a better chance that your legal service, your hierarchy, the commissioner at the end, and later the courts will support you. And that's how you pick or deal with a case. Again, it's very pragmatic. There are no silver bullets for these things. So let me go to a couple of comments which were prompted instead of following what I wanted to say today. Margarita put a lot of emphasis on more creative regulatory solutions. Couldn't agree more. I think we all agree that in a market economy, price regulation doesn't work. We shouldn't meddle. If we took too many cases, why not to take more cases, and so forth. So remember, we started with a regulatory and market failure. So we see from time to time high prices where we probably know that the profits are unnecessarily there. Those profits are in the pocket of smaller mid-sized companies who are not in R&D and whose funds will not be channeled automatically to pharmaceutical R&D. So it's a waste of resources. Now, if society overpays for the latest iPhone and the latest iPhone, that's people's decision, how they spend their disposable income. But if we have to pay for evergreening, unnecessarily patent hopping, product hopping scenarios, again, it's going to cost all of us, and somebody's going to get the short end on fairness. Maybe it's a hospital bed, maybe it's a vaccine or something else. So we have to, I think we have to deal with it. And again, the demand curve for most of these drugs is a vertical line, totally inelastic. His face reminds us, hey, you want to live? Get it. And I bet many of these negotiations with reimbursement authorities goes the same way. Which government, which health minister, which regulator can afford to say "Nyat" to a 750, and again, I'm just using him because it's not in Europe, 700 saying, no, I'm not buying this for 750, keep it, go, sell it only in Germany, not in Portugal. Happens to those 5,000 people in Portugal for whom it's a life-saving drug. Politically, it's untenable. And I think society should foresee this. So when we talk about, well, but there is regulators, it's a regulatory regime. Yes, but this is not like a power plant. The power plant was mentioned. You know, I'm a sitting duck if I have a power plant. If I laid my cables, I'm a sitting duck. What the regulator tells me, I cannot pick up my power plant and say, okay, I'm not selling it to you. But pharma companies can threaten not to supply. They don't like to do it because it's a reputational issue, et cetera, but they can still simply not selling. And we know that, you know, Google sometimes shut down some service in a member states, or or elsewhere, and some of the drugs, expensive novel drugs, are not available in every member state because the member states decides not to pay that price. Pharma doesn't care. And what happens? The private doctor says in a new member state that, well, if you really want this drug, well, you have to buy it in Vienna out of your pocket or something like that. Do we want that? No. What these member states do? They cough up the money, put it in somehow. Now, big issue so that was on, to pick up on regulatory gaming issue, which is a very good observation. And it was a factor in Aspen. It always have to be a factor to bring the case. But I would respectfully disagree. I think it was Baptist who said, that it's a sine qua non, that you shouldn't have ever an expressive price case when there is some funny business going on. I tell you why. This guy probably didn't do any funny business. To be more precise, 5-8 years later, the FTC brought a case, and because the FTC had to show that he did something else to fit in antitrust regime. But that's a side issue. He just jacked up the price. And our mandate is that when you simply see a very high price, should I do it or shouldn't I do it? So I don't think the extra factors are sine qua non. It makes the case much easier. That's why you see all these extra funny businesses and the sharp price increases, as it was said in the panel. Those fact patterns lend themselves to a much stronger case for the prosecution. But it shouldn't be a sine qua non. And I tell you why it shouldn't be a sine qua non. Think of the AstraZeneca case, which is my North Star for my team in pharma antitrust. What did both courts ask themselves? Is this competition on the merits or not? I know lawyers immediately say, oh, this is a very woolly test. Oh my God, who knows what's competition on the merits, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, common law is full of these woolly tests. Reasonable man, good luck. Reasonable doctor, specifically good. Reasonable anesthesiologist in your case, good luck. Argues until the cows come home, right? So you read the Aspen case, not an easy one, 700 pages and so forth. But the court says, what did the company do under 102? The same way as excessive price cases. And if there is gaming of the regulatory system, which was actually the second offense, as we know, there was exactly using the loophole, because the poor regulators, they try to regulate as much as possible. And every time they regulate, there's a loophole and an unintended consequences. And a smart company with some smart lawyers, they're going to say, okay, we rebrand it, we do it. They played that game in the UK, whatever. It never ends. So you simply invoke the principle. Is this competition on the merits? Playing these games, when you are a dominant company, you have a substantial market share. Not to mention the fact that sometimes this funny business also falls into traditional foreclosure tactics, right? Where you simply aim to exclude a rival from the marketplace. So I wouldn't really argue that the extra elements are sine qua non. It's very good if they are there. Now, on Ilan's comments on patented drugs. First of all, it shouldn't be an absolute binary issue, because we see that you have original patents, exclusivity, where I personally, and that's my personal view, one should never muck with that. I tell you why. Sovaldi, Gilead Sovaldi, to fix hepatitis C is a very good example. Around the same time in the US, when this bête noire of the pharmaceutical industry created all these things, there was a similar hearings taking place regarding Sovaldi, which was a miracle drug to fix hepatitis C. Hepatitis C was something, a lot of people died. They dragged on for decades, sometimes in and out of emergency rooms. average treatment of a hepatitis C patients over 1 million in the United States or something like that. Another guy who bought from the original inventor and then resold it to somebody else, and then Gilead bought it. So who took the risks and the funding of early innovation is a very difficult, very different discussions, but ended up in Gilead's hand, and they fixed the problem. For 6 weeks, you take the pill, and your hepatitis C is gone. There was one problem. The company was charging $120,000 for a 6-week treatment. Again, social outcry. Slowly, the drug came to Europe, or it was about to come to Europe. So my commissioner was flooded by mainly socialist MEPs, letters saying, look, do something. This is unbelievable. 120,000. We have so many hepatitis. Actually, Spain had that problem for historical reasons because of the blood transfusions. They had a higher percentage of hepatitis C cases, but some other member states as well. So it was a very difficult dilemma to take an excessive price case or not. And on balance, and I would say it's priority setting, because there's nothing in 102 which says you shall not look into patent protected cases and so forth, because Sovaldi was so innovative. And by the way, Gilead CEO went in front of the same committees where this guy went, and he said, you should thank me that I'm charging only 120,000 and not 240,000, because otherwise the patient would cost society $1 million, and not to mention the human suffering and dragging on. So I fixed your problem relatively cheap. And quite frankly, I personally, and again, journalists, don't quote me or whatever, I sympathize with that, because if there is something good in capitalism, this is it. That was a good example. Wasn't the Russians, wasn't the Chinese, it wasn't us. It was the biotech industry somewhere. Actually, the original inventor came from Egypt, to be fair, but somebody bought it, somebody financed it, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole ecosystem, how biotech is being funded in California, very successfully often. So we have this dilemma that you don't want to stifle innovation, and I think we shouldn't. We should be very careful. Companies and lawyers always make this argument. Every time a regulator or a competition authority want to do something immediate, oh my God, you stifle, we're not going to have money for R&D, please, and jobs in Europe, we have to leave somewhere else. Okay, we've heard it before. You have to show causation. You have to connect the dots. If you read Pfizer's CEO in the last 5-8 years, he said many times, I'm much better at buying things than developing in-house. In-house, it's shooting in the dark, phase 1, phase 2, but 20%, 10% chances. My scientists cost me a lot of money. I wait until they pass phase 2. It's promising. I ask the venture capitalist, how much? Bingo, we come to a price. I bring it in my stable. There's a very good chance that. So now, if this guy, Pfizer, and I'm sorry if I use Pfizer, I like to use a big pharma or something like that. Then later they have an off-patent drug for many, many years which ruins his margin, a small amount, but it's still, the margin is depleting, which CEOs like to claim every quarter that I maintain high margins because that's what stock likes to hear, right? And there's this product which has a relatively low market, it says, unload it. Then they find a schmuck like this, who buys it and says, thank you very much. Yeah. Now, if we were to allow this guy to charge high priced and we wouldn't prosecute him, then Pfizer would charge him next time a higher price as well, because it will say, you will get away with jacking up the price. So if you manage to send a message to the industry that don't be too greedy on excessive pricing, then it has an effect on the early negotiations when big pharma unloads these off-patent drugs to these various entrepreneurs. There are a couple of cases which were reported in the FT in the last 5-7 years where similar characters, small pharmaceutical companies buy these drugs, whether they use the regulatory mumbo jumbo a little bit, rebranding it and so forth to avoid a price regulation. That's for me secondary. It's a business that big pharma, I don't need it anymore. I don't lose money on it, but my margin is ridiculous. Unload it, and somebody buys it and then jacks up the price. We have to have a chilling effect in place somehow. And that has nothing to do with taking cases to when the original patent is still there, because I think there we have to be very careful that we don't send chilling effect to Gilead and Sovaldi and the other solutions. Society has to deal with that. And we're going to have more and more Sovaldi type of situations. Individual medicines, sometimes per patient, cost, I think the first one, which was approved in the United States, cost $420,000 for one single payment. Adam's valid point, fairness. You pay that one person, you take $500,000 away from how many basic bed sheets or other things which people cannot afford or don't get the best possible care. I don't know. Extremely difficult decisions. I don't think a competition authority should be there and should struggle. Article 9, the last thing, and then maybe we do some Q&As and so forth. Like the current case, the current merger case, Illumina Grail, I have my fingerprint on this Article 9 one as well. As Kennedy famously said, success has many fathers, failure is an orphan. So if both Illumina Grail will be a success, there will be many fathers. If it's a failure, they can trace it back to me. This Article 9 is also, I was in minority to advocate Article 9 within the House. There are many good pros and cons for having an Article 7, and we've heard them as well earlier. Again, I'm a pragmatist. I made my pitch to Margrethe Vestager, my boss, that, look, we can say, actually the biggest issue was, and I'll tell you a little inner secret, so to speak, for us, the team was a bigger issue that what is the difference laying out the facts and our analysis in an Article 7 and an Article 9? Because historically, an Article 9 is a simpler decision, knowing that it's not going to be challenged. So we went out of our way in negotiating with the company that we thought we sent enough message how we analyzed the case, better or worse, good or bad, to the bar, to the legal community. And once we assured relatively ourselves that our Article 7 decision wouldn't be more informative, then I think on balance, taking an Article 9 was the right decision for us. Now, I have to emphasize, and this was not mentioned in the panel, that as you very well know, for an Article 9, you need two to tango. You have to have the company coming to you and play ball and initiate it, and they can withdraw any time. So, this company looked at the facts, at what's going on, said, let's leave it behind. Let's do some things which are set out in the decision, including certain remedies, additional remedies. And overall, we thought it served, as it was quoted, Ms. Vestager said, the solutions, the lowering the prices came much faster than otherwise exhausting a long court proceedings. So the last issue, a lot of criticism about excessive pricing. That is complicated. I think a scholar said it a couple of years ago, there are unsurmountable or formidable difficulties for agencies to deal with and try to define it. I tend to agree. I fully agree. But as Madame Lagarde recently, a while ago, quoted Kennedy, we go to the moon not because it's easy. So I think we have to attempt to fix this and tell these guys, please don't get carried away. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Paul, if I may please stay there. Question time. But before that, your story about this smiley face and reminded me of a joke that I heard some time ago, that there is this antitrust lawyer walking together with an antitrust economist down the street, and the lawyer tells the economist, look, a $10 note. And the economist, very dignified, does not even look at it. Impossible. There cannot be such an easy gain in the floor. Otherwise, somebody else would have taken it. It is true that there are not that many $10 notes in the streets, but every now and then there is one. Okay. So before taking the questions online, which there were two, I have merged them into one, but I want to offer the audience here a first opportunity to ask if there is any question. No? Then I think that what came online, I hope to make justice. I would like to merge into one topic, which is as simple as this. In these cases of excessive pricing, why should a competition authority intervene? Should it not be left in the hands of the regulatory side? More or less is my rephrasing of this question. If there are no more questions, we will finish and then we will open some drinks. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a good question. And I think the simple answer to that, imagine you are sleeping and in the middle of the night, you wake up for some noise. You look at the window and you see your neighbor's house or the house across the street is on fire. Oh God. You jump out, you run out to the street, you see his neighbor and says, what's going on? What's going on? Where are the firefighters? Oh, don't worry. Yes, they are coming. They're coming. What do? Do you go back to sleep? No, you still get your hose and you start to do the fire, to deal with the fire, even though the regulator is coming and gonna fix all these problems. What do you do as a little competition authority while the regulators are about to fix it and we're all waiting for these regulatory / market failures? I mean, I don't know where there are no collective procurement things for these drugs and so forth. I have no idea why Daraprim after 4 or 5 years was still 500. I don't know. But if it were in our backyard, I would just say, well, it's either the invisible hand, which will fix it, or I don't know, the regulator should let imports in, or God knows what, I don't know. But of course, regulation would be the better tool. Of course, the firefighters should get to your neighbor's house. But until they come, you take a bucket and so.
Yes, there is one question.
Thank you very much, and thank you for a fascinating talk. I'm struck by the parallel between the topic we've been talking about for the last hour or so of pharmaceuticals and excessive pricing, and the previous topic, which was about contributions to networks and fair share, net neutrality, and the interplay between those. And given that we're in an era where many antitrust concepts are being rethought about and reanalyzed, and we see that in particular in the United States and Germany and so on. I wonder whether you might have thoughts about, whether a fresh look at excessive pricing, what if the excessive price is zero? And what if the price is set by the customer who is dominant? And what if it's the customer who's making the excessive profits in that scenario? And I ask because I'm struck, I've been involved in the fair share debate for several years. And they have constantly made the argument that, oh, well, we need all this profits for R&D. And to my mind, they're expecting someone to make an antitrust case based on sort of the reverse of excess pricing. I wonder whether you might have thoughts on that, please.
Yeah, I'm not a telecom guy. So what I understand is very basics. First of all, within the commission, it's DG Connect issue. So competition, DG Comp is watching the regulatory things as it unfolds. We, like in other sectors, always comment if we see possible unintended consequences that incumbent entrenched players perhaps can get some extra advantage or some tools to foreclose rivals and challengers. I mean, this is classic competition concerns everywhere. But other than that, it's out for public consultation. I understand a very broad range of issues. So for me, it's difficult to draw parallel. It's a vertical issue. Honestly, I tried to come to the panel to educate myself a little bit, but I couldn't come earlier because I know Peter Alexander, who's an expert in this field. I know him from previous lives, but I couldn't get here. The first thing came to my mind is that, like roads, like classic roads, if there's an area in, and this is my personal wobbling before I drink, if you look at the map, France, for example, is a big country in the middle of nowhere. Let's say somebody says we need more roads. Yeah, who's going to build the roads? So you have two options. Either you build toll roads, and then somebody's gonna get that toll road and you collect money who passes through, or you say it's a public good, it's a free, like freeways in the United States or elsewhere. We build the road somehow with public funds. We tender it out, somebody does it for me, and then when I drive my car and I cross Austria, I have to pay 30 euros for one trip crossing Austria because I'm coming back 2 weeks later. I have to buy another ticket to cross it again. So, and of course, for big truck companies, maybe you want to levy more. So here I see that the question from Big Telecom says that there are 5 big truck companies who use half of the time my roads. This road is private, but maybe I don't get enough money from the end customers. It's complicated. I don't know. Sorry, I don't have an answer.
Okay. No more questions. You have one?
Yeah. Well, now we have you here, Paul. I wanted to ask you because there's also somebody from the Dutch Competition Authority here, and I thought I'm going to ask it because I was confronted with a very ill family member over the last 2 years in the Netherlands. And when I was driving back and forth from the Netherlands back to Brussels, what I did was actually I was thinking what we do in Brussels, how relevant is that for the healthcare system that I'm now being confronted with in the Netherlands? And one of the things that I really liked in this panel and what I also see here is that when you need medicine, when you need care, it's such a different situation from buying a beer, or it's such a different situation. So last week I was in Christina Cafara's conference. I think you were there as well. And one of the big debates was, has the Commission missed a boat? Is it doing the relevant cases, et cetera, et cetera? And when I hear you say, well, we have 15 people for this case or 18 people, does the Commission have the priorities right? No, I mean,
I can get into trouble.
No, but I saw Vestager yesterday saying, oh, we'll do some more tax cases. I mean, this doctor in the Netherlands who is treating all these old people in Europe, what do they care about these tax cases? So does the Commission have does population in Europe not expect more from the Commission in terms of this type of case? I know it's a question that I put you a bit with pressure under, but
absolutely, and the Commission always does the right thing, and we couldn't expect anything from an official to say, and very much so. We are considering all the possibilities to do the right thing and the right priority. But it's a little bit more seriously, yes. And that's why I like to preach to everybody, even private practitioners, about that pharma is with finite resources. It's not like an iPhone. When you do evergreening and life cycle management of widgets to maximize profits to ad nauseum, it's fine. If it's for the iPhone, it's fine. If it's flat screen television, it's fine for my tennis shoes or whatever. I don't care. But pharma, everybody, and it's healthcare generally. And pharma is just what, 10, 15% of total healthcare. I mean, that has to be efficient. And if it's in private hands, you really have to make it competitive, that people compete away the excessive profit. And last year in merger settings, we had a 1-year ongoing multilateral pharma group between the FTC, DOJ, us, Canadians, and CMA. I was very active in that. We collected a lot of public testimonies, and we had a concluding session, webinar. I coordinated with Commissioner Slaughter's cabinet exactly on the question, what about stifling competition? Because in mergers, you know, we moved the goalpost, DigiComp, ahead of everybody else 7 years ago, and we started to look at overlapping early pipelines. And we raised objections to early phase 1, phase 2 pipelines sometimes, in some circumstances. And since then, we have a lot of good cases, published cases. And then, of course, you have to ask, does it have a stifling effect? And that's where I looked into that there is no evidence, and I'm sure the pharmaceutical industry would have already brought very good evidence studies that there is this close correlation between the venture capital, which funds the startups, you know, and flips it and funds it until it gets there, and how much money at the end big pharma makes on the blockbusters and on their other drugs. And if there is a connection or there is a spillover stifling innovation, we have to not stop, but we have to adjust. But until then, you know, I think the venture capitalists, the early ones, they are a different type of animals. They gamble, and they know 1 out of 5 will work, or 1 out of 10 will get to phase 3 trials. But those, when they get there, there's a business case, they can sell it, they pocket the money. They've been working like that in the last 30, 40 years, very successfully for the benefit of the whole humanity. Wonderful drugs were brought up. But I'm not so sure that tomorrow Pfizer will not pay the required reward to the venture capitalist who brought the next Sovaldi drug, just because their profits is a little bit eaten in. So there are much more complex dynamics, and as long as there is no proof there, and on our side, we have to really, as you said, it's citizens' interest. Thank you.
Okay, then allow me to request a round of applause to our keynote speaker.
Thank you.
With this, we close the session. Thank you very much to everybody.